Yeah, we have our own project.
Yeah.
Is it like a meetup project or is it?
Oh yeah.
Well, like, you know, you're gonna get like small,
Working?
like independent
Yep.
developers
Nice.
here.
Yeah.
Like, so we're all working on that project. Since I went to
Okay.
ours is gonna be an
Sounds good.
I don't have a card for my.
That sounds good to me.
All right. Nice. Good stuff.
Do you want to try and do anything in the video? Try to get it now.
Oh yeah. See if we can mess with the opacity of it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
One we had in May, we had guys on ice sculptures there. He uses some scanning blueprints, like foundations, and he had us come in and we had our meeting. So let's go. This month we're having like a basement for the company. We have some booze and food.
It's to talk to like actual professors because I'm not approaching this from like the programming side of things.
There's a link to the
I,
okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can change it if you make it an actual scene.
Turns it to like 100 something pages.
Maybe. Oh, never mind. I lied. That's not gonna do anything. Oh, maybe if I know there's a way to do. Well, I mean, I guarantee there's a way to. I just haven't messed with it in a couple of years.
We're gonna start at 6:30, so he's got like 5-ish minutes.
Is it a pretty like how?
So it is a movie script that too because I'm actually going to give a talk probably here because Garrett's putting it in this list. So September 5th, video talk about running our first games. Sweet. Yeah. So it's not only taking into account like the author intent of like, you know, this is what we put in the game. There's also the players controlling things and experimenting.
It might actually might be under like filters or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Looks maybe.
That's a little bit more personalized of a story than the one you intend to tell them.
Compressor game. Oh, that's this person.
You know, the game can't be even if it's not like crazy. Sometimes it's not games.
Right. This sounds fun.
Maybe a mask. I don't think a mask would do that.
Yes, I mean, as it is. You know, it's like a choose your own adventure type game. Just branching out there. Stuff like that.
Try going adding a chroma key filter.
That's under proper filters.
Filters, yeah. And then setting, go to the key color type, set custom, and change it to white. And then change the opacity to like 20 or something like that. Yeah, maybe not. I was thinking it might trick it, but
Yeah.
I'll try doing black instead. No. Okay, that's not gonna work. Yeah, go ahead and take both of those off.
Especially TV games. They are they can be as short as just a few minutes. This is like
I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some rules, but, you know, it's not a
And maybe just move the video to the right a little bit more and then make it just a tiny smidge smaller.
Okay.
like it's hard because if you go to one, then like there's gonna be another one that's happening.
Probably,
that you want to
probably like that.
It's probably good.
I was trying to be conscious of it.
I'll keep an eye on it.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
I know they do a lot of like, hey, what kind of project do you want?
Okay. Cool. No, should do it. Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you, though. I'll make sure I get some after. But. All right. I'm going to start real quick. Sorry to stop any conversations that are going on. So I'm Austin. I'm going to be doing a little talk today on the conceptual process. I consider myself a concept artist. I love concept art because every time something new gets to be done, you get to be the idea guy. And I like being the idea guy because there's nothing on the page and I get to do whatever I want. And I like that. Because I'm not very good at finishing things, so concept art pertains to that really well. You're like, oh, this idea is enough to where it's established, and then you're like, hey, let's start something new. And then we'll do like 20 things that are new, and it's awesome. So just as a precursor, again, I'm going to be doing concept art. This is the way I do things. Obviously, concept art is a very broad topic, and by no means is this black and white or like you have to follow these steps. This is just the way that I do it, and obviously you can adapt the way that I do things to however helps you best. I'm mostly going to be doing 2D concept. I dabble in ZBrush and Modo because my school thought that Modo was a good thing to learn and not Maya. But mainly 2D. I use 3D more as like a really rough thing to be able to paint on top of it, which is something I'll talk about. But some people purely concept in ZBrush. So I know like we had a visiting artist come in at my school from our Industrial Light and Magic, and he purely concepts in Maya and then does a little bit of paint over on top of that. But for me, I do a lot of 2D concept art. So. That's not what it was supposed to do. Make that full screen. All right, so just an example of something I've done. This is a character that I did for my thesis project last semester and a video game concept that I had going. Just an idea of kind of stuff I do. So again, who am I? So I'm a Kendall graduate. I graduated last semester from Kendall. That was a digital media program. I'm a big sci-fi nerd. My biggest inspirations are Destiny, Warhammer 40K, and Dead Space. Really like the horror Dead Space. Love Dead Space. The first one was my favorite. I didn't play the third one. The second one I got halfway through. I was like, it's a little more shooter than it was the horror in the first game. I really like the sound, and Dead Space is amazing. I actually meant to bring my Destiny concept art book. That's one thing I forgot. Apologize. I've been moving the last couple of days, so all my stuff is in boxes. Grew up on the east side of the state. Stuff doesn't matter. So let's talk about what is concept art. In my opinion, it
Question.
is. Oh, go for it.
So you grew up on the east side of the state?
I did.
Which part?
I grew up in Livonia.
Livonia? Okay. I'm
Yeah.
from Detroit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a lot of friends in Dearborn. I've been to Detroit a few times. I had a couple people in Roseville. Roseville's close to Detroit too.
Yep.
Yeah, I spent.
It's all Detroit.
Yeah, it's all Detroit. Yeah, I like that side of the state. But I love GR too. So both of them are great cities, just on different sides. So concept art, I think it's a starting point for a visual idea. It's what sets the tone for an asset, and it tells a story before there's a story. So a starting point, usually in a pipeline setting, most of the time I'm going to be using in the concept of working with a client. But if the client is you, because you're doing your own ideas, then put me instead of client. So usually what will happen with concept art is it's going to be used as the basis for a 3D asset. So whether it's going to be ZBrush or done in Maya or what have you, or Blender for the people who like open source things. Generally, that concept art is going to be a jumping off point for those people to go somewhere with. So they're probably going to do an interpretation of your art, but you're really the jumping off point. Like I said, I like being the idea guy, and that's where concept art is the ideas. Talking about it sets a tone. Again, going back to the idea that you're the idea guy here. Obviously, there's an art director, or probably going to be an art director if you're not working freelance, who's going to give you an idea of where you want to go with these things. But you got to set the tone. So color, emotion, theme, whether it's scary, happy, you got to know your target audience. Is it going for kids? So you need to make it like cel shaded and really happy, really big eyes and stuff like that. Or are you going for more of a teenage group of people? Understand like there's got to be, maybe don't put language across them, like if they're wearing like cardboard and stuff like that, maybe don't put F-bombs and stuff like that on there, but understand like what your target audience is, or if you're targeting like young adults, then go for it, and they'll think it's awesome. But you got to be conscious of those things. It's got to tell a story without words being said. It doesn't matter if it's a character, it doesn't matter if it's a prop, it doesn't matter if it's an environment. It needs to tell a story just by looking at it, and then when the game happens, or the animation, the commercial, the movie that you're doing the concept up for happens, then the story can come with it. But a story needs to be told as soon as you look at it. Even if it's something as simple as a crate, is this crate worn? What kind of setting it come from? Is it modern? Is it sci-fi? Is it archaic? Is it broken? Does it work very well? Does it look like it was put together very well? Does it look like it wasn't put together very well? Does it function? Does it not function? All these things you can tell a story just by looking at it, and you don't have to say anything. And that, as a concept artist, those are things that you need to be able to do. You need to be able to tell that story visually. Perfect example, if anyone's a 40K fan, if you look at orcs in 40K, nothing they have together looks like it works, but it tells a story in that. So, what to start with? So what might a client ask you? What questions should you ask your client? First off, I'm going to say your client's probably not going to ask you questions, and that's your job as a concept artist to ask the questions, because if you don't ask the questions, they're not going to ask the questions because they don't know what they want. They're not the art person. You're the art person. You got to ask the questions, as I've learned quite frequently in the current commission I'm doing right now, because it can be detrimental if you don't. So, the client's not going to ask the details. So influences, you want to like get an idea of what they want, because and again, you know, if this is for you, you have to know what you want, which hopefully you do. But for them, you got to get an idea what they want. You got to get that target audience. You got to see what genre they're going for. You got to see the mood that they want to go for. Like, what's the objective of the thing you're making? Is it a pivotal part of the game? Is it a background part of the game? Is it just something that sits on a table? Not that something like that shouldn't have personality. Everything in the game should be purposeful and things like, or not to say a game. I keep saying game. I pertain towards games, so I'm talking kind of like that. But this applies to videos and commercial and more professional, not professional, commercial things as well. So you got to ask those questions, because it's really to help you. One, you want to do what the person's asking you to do. Two, if you have this idea in your head and you think it's so awesome, then you put all this time and effort into it, and then they don't like it, then you've wasted your time and theirs. And then you're going to have to be like, oh, well, I want to renegotiate the contract because I spent more time on it than I said it. And they're like, you just didn't listen to me off the bat, and I don't want to pay the extra money. And then it's just, you're going to leave a bad taste in their mouth, and then you're hurting your networking and everything like that. So you got to ask the questions, you know. Make sure you know what it is that they want, or get the best idea that you can so that you can move forward and then ask more questions once you've provided them with some stuff. Also, again, pertaining to the situation I'm in right now, make sure the people that are paying you are the opinions that are getting approved, because I've gotten opinions approved by people who I thought was making decisions and had the money for it, and they weren't. And then the people that was paying for it were like, I don't like this. And I'm like, I should have been talking to you a lot earlier. So, what to start with? Okay, so you've talked to your client or yourself, and you figured out kind of an idea of what they want, and you got an idea of like, okay, maybe it's a horror genre, or maybe it's for kids or something like that, and you got an idea of it. So now you got to start somewhere. You got like this couple words, whether it's like a table. I need a table for this game map. So, or it's like, oh, I need a table in a sci-fi setting. It needs to be horror, and it needs to have lots of iron and stuff like that. It can be anything from a single word to a paragraph to something written on a napkin and handed to you. So where do you start with that? Starting with nothing's hard. I'm sure all of us have looked at a blank piece of paper for hours on end and gone, I don't know what to draw, I'm having art block, I don't know where to go from here. So what's really good to do is, I use Pinterest a lot, but you can use whatever you want, but it's good to build a visual library to inspire yourself and to give yourself a direction on where you want to go, or at least give your brain a direction on where to start thinking from, instead of just anything that's possibly in my head to like, oh, I want to build this armor set and I really want to do something more medieval, so I'm going to pull up my file of medieval armor sets and be like, oh, let me look at these. Oh, I really like the way that the plating goes on top of itself and stuff like that. But you're directing your creativity in a direction as opposed to just like whatever's in my brain. So I will bring up one of the Pinterest boards that I made for this. Go up here. So, actually, we'll do this first. We'll finish that part first. So things to consider. Again, mood, genre, style, benchmarks, inspirations, color, visual library. Ooh, got too far ahead. So, again, be purposeful in your direction. So the three main things that I think that I generally board are inspiration, style, and color. So inspiration is, again, like I was saying with the medieval armor, if you want to make an armor set and you want it to be more knightly, you want it to look like it's out of World War II, you want it to look like it's handcrafted, things like that. That inspiration, just go on Pinterest and find a bunch of things that you think look cool that would fit into that, and then make a library of that. Style. Do you want it to look like a comic book? Do you want it to be cel shaded? Do you want it to be super hyper realistic? Do you want it to be somewhere in between? Do you want it to be Paper Mario and flat for a 2D platformer? You have to figure out where that style is and then find some games that are movies, whatever, that are like that and build that visual library. So now you're like, okay, these are the things I like. and then this is the style they have to be in, and then color, because I think color is really important. You want the game to be happy, you want it to be darker, you want it to be both of those things, and have multiple levels on that. When you concept multiple levels and get that emotion across, so you have where you're getting the inspiration from, the style that has to fit into, and then how that style fits with the color on it. Okay, so we'll bring up the Pinterest board as an example. So for the thing that I was working on, as you can see, I use this a lot. So with this, the character that I was making for this, I really wanted to do something, like I generally do something that's a little more clean, and I wanted to be a little more ragtag. So I looked at a bunch of more cyberpunk stuff as opposed to just full hard surface. I really like looking at bike helmets as a basis because it gives you a real good sense of structural soundness to go off of, as opposed to purely just like piecing things together. So this is just a visual library that I built of different clothing that I thought would look cool, or that I thought looked cool, and I would apply or use some of the ideas to build the character that I was working on. And then this is some of the style stuff. It's also some stuff that I just thought was visually interesting. The stuff that's down here is earlier on. I had started the idea and I wanted it to be a little bit more armored up, and then I slowly moved away to a little more organic shapes. I've always, Destiny's a big influence of mine. I really like the contrast of organic shapes and hard surface next to each other, whereas like Halo is purely hard surface, and it gets, I really like the early Halos, but the later ones it just becomes so busy for the sake of being busy, and it's just, I don't like it as much, and so I've really floated more towards Destiny, and so that's kind of like where these benchmarks are coming from. So back to this. All right. All right, so beginning to ideate. The big thing is use your research. You didn't spend all that time looking at all these images and building these libraries and not to use them. I have caught myself doing this sometimes. I spend all this time, I'm like, all right, make this board, I'm gonna look at this style, and I want it to be like this, and then I just like zone in on my Cintiq, and I'm like, oh yeah, we'll just do this and this and this, and then you're like, well, where did I end up? I have to start over, because it wasn't like, maybe that's a good thing, but if you're working with a client and you just go off on this random tangent that looks cool, but it doesn't fit what they want, then you just wasted your own time, and you didn't end up where you wanted to. Silhouettes are a big thing, and it's some of this is do as I say, not as I do, because I'm getting better at it. Sometimes I jump the gun on ideas instead of spending as much time in iterations as I should to make sure that I get all the ideas out. And brain dumping, no idea is bad. And while you may think some ideas are bad, it's good to get bad ideas down so that they're not in your head anymore. Because anytime you don't use that bad idea, you're like, oh, maybe I could go and do that. And then that kind of like slips itself into iterations every once in a while. And then you're just wasting time by putting this bad idea into certain things instead of just getting it out. And if you don't put it down, you may think initially that it's a bad idea, but then you put it down and you're like, maybe it worked out. So there's no reason to not just put everything on your brain down there, because there's, the whole point of concept art is to explore all the iterations and versions of things in your mind to see which one works best. And a client or an art director is going to like to see more of something than less. So there's no reason not to put that stuff down. So just some examples of what some silhouette pages might look like. So you've got, so I use one thing, my next slide is this, but nothing is cheating. Personally, I don't think so. It's all being, some stuff is cheating, but using 3D models and things like that and understanding where to cut corners so that your productivity time, like no one's gonna give me crap about having a 3D model as a basis so that I make sure, so that when I'm designing things, I don't have to remember anatomy and stuff like that, or check my anatomy, because I know that it's correct, because I know that this 3D model is correct. So when I'm building stuff and ideating on top of it, I don't have to constantly be like, oh, well, maybe I made the shoulder pad isn't curving around the tricep the right way, or the deltoid the right way. Like, I know that anatomically this figure is correct. So when I put stuff on it, it lets me just build on top of it. I'm not questioning, and it makes the process quicker. Just another, I did a couple more of some ideations that I did of some armor sets, show that no idea is bad, even though a lot of these are bad, but I had to get through them to get out of whatever the project was that I was working on at the time. So yeah, so back to this, that nothing's cheating. And if you do, like, there's an instance that happened a couple months ago where there was a game where they took the 3D models out of Call of Duty, put a silencer on it or something like that, and threw it in their game and they called it good. That's clearly cheating. You're taking someone else's topology and, you know, doing all that stuff. But using something that's very basic, like the anatomy of a human being, I mean, if you want to give credit to where those things, but a lot of these things are free for download and stuff like that. And if, you know, if they say license free and all that stuff, I'm not trying to say steal other people's work by any means, but understanding that really basic things like anatomy, or even if you take an image of someone standing in a T-pose and then you draw on top of them, it's going to help you move through the process a lot quicker. So just to, I was going to show you guys a little bit of how I go about doing that. Okay. So as an example of silhouette, something that's really easy. Where are you at, my finder? Okay. So something that's really easy is to take an image of something, like if you want to do a prop like a weapon, like a butcher knife or a K-bar. What you can do is so what I do is I just create a mask around it, and I can show that to you. It's pretty easy. So if I want to take this K-bar here, so what I previously did was I got rid of all the white, selected it, expanded by 2 just to make sure it's there, select inverse, and then I put a layer on top of it, and then I fill it with black. So now I have this layer that I have a silhouette on, and what this does is if something looks interesting purely in a silhouette form, when you start filling it in with details, it's going to be that much more interesting. But something needs to be recognizable and interesting just in silhouette. If you look at any of the really good characters, I probably should have gotten some examples, but they just have an interesting silhouette. Like if you see a silhouette of Master Chief, you know it's Master Chief. He just has certain angular things, and that shape of his helmet is just very iconic, and so you can tell who he is as a silhouette. So if something is interesting as a silhouette, then when you fill in those details, it's just going to be that much more interesting. But you just something you want to avoid doing is if you have, like, let's say a bunch of characters or a bunch of weapons, if you line all of them up and you can't tell the difference between them, then their silhouette is not differing enough to be interesting and be unique between one another. So off of that caveat, so something you can do, so you just have, let's just say you want to make, so it's too small. So let's say you wanted to make this, like, even if you just want to do something simple, like I want this to be longer, just move this out this way. This is really rough. But even something as simple as that, or maybe we wanted to play with this shape a little bit. We want it to have like this, I don't know, like hook, like fish hook type of a thing going on. Maybe this is cool too. Yeah, I'll make this less, make this more curved. And like, obviously this is really rough, but just very quickly we've gone from a K-bar to something completely different and as a completely different silhouette. And you can see how doing this, you could get through many iterations of a weapon, or, you know, whatever, whether it's a helmet or a shoulder piece or something like that. You could get through iterations of that very quickly and have lots of them to choose from. Whereas if you want to sketch all the inner workings of something and understand, you know, all these things, it takes a lot more time, and you may be wasting a lot of time on something that wasn't an idea that you wanted to take that far. Whereas this gets you, like, you know, you can do 50 of them if you want to, in probably like, you know, 15-20 minutes at max, and then you go through, pick like the top 5 that you like, and then do something, and maybe even do another set of silhouettes and little changes between those ones, and then do something more detailed on top of that, which I'll show in a second. But this is a real, you know, and this silhouette can be applied to whatever, whether it could be environments, it can be props, it can be characters, it can be weapons are props, but something like that. So like these did not take me too long. It's just playing around with ideas and taking some very simple in that silhouette shape and doing some iterations of it. Let's see. I think I have it on the next slide. All right, so another thing you can do, so just like that silhouette, you can, and where I was talking about doing ideating on top of 3D models, my ZBrush sculpts are not good by any means. I'm not a super good 3D artist, but this is when I was doing my engineer's helmet for my thesis project. I just did some quick stuff to get an idea of the structure and to be able to think more in a 3D space. And then I turned it sideways and then just drew on top of it. And so it gave me a good basis for what it, like understanding that this is how much space I wanted to take up in a 3D space, and then flipping it sideways and then doing all the designing, like making it different and things like that. Whereas maybe someone who's much better in ZBrush than I am could probably go through iterations a lot quicker with the actual sculpt. But being a 2D artist, I just did something really rough, and then it gave me a basis to understand that it was structurally, it took up the right amount of space on someone's head, and then I could do iterations of that, or on top of that, like using it as a guide to draw on top of it. Some more iterations, and I'm showing you that. All right, so the next one, so after you've gone through these iterations, you've got like tons and tons and tons of them, and you want to narrow it down to the ones that you like. Generally, like I said, do like a silhouette page of probably like 50 or something like that, and then pick the top 5 that you like. And then once it goes into silhouette, what you can do, and I'll show you this in a second, is change the opacity down, and then you start drawing within that silhouette, and you're making shapes within the shapes. So you're kind of breaking it down Barney style. You're like, okay, these are squares and circles, and now let's make them something more than squares and circles. Let's make it into a cube, or let's make it into this hard surface thing that has a lot of interlocking pieces and things like that. But you got to start broad and then work your way down to the small details. So with that, so with that, so if we want to do that, let's just say with this one, so we could take the opacity down a little bit, down to something that's more manageable there. So let's say we wanted to make this, so now you can draw on top of this, get a little bit some more smoother lines. Maybe you want to come in here and then put some kind of a grip on this. I don't know. Let's say it's a grip here. Just something real simple. And then come out this way, and maybe this piece kind of like arcs up like this. Like this, and it's got some kind of like a shield guard on it, somewhere to catch a blade. And then this piece goes up this way. But I mean, I won't go super into detail on this. Maybe this is like jagged here. This way, it's like a nice spiral. Something like that. But again, you're giving yourself that basis, that silhouette to work off of, and then you can work on the inner workings of it. And you could do, another 20 inner working iterations of that. And then you can, I mean, if you wanted to go off of this silhouette, you can clearly do that too. You're like, oh, I want this to be really jagged for some reason. And then maybe this has like this, I don't know, jagged shape here. But you don't have to follow the silhouette necessarily. It's just giving you a guideline. So you're like, okay, these are really interesting silhouettes, and then I can make something off of that. And it's just being very systematic with your creativity and being, not to put your creativity in a box by any means, but giving yourself a direction and to keep yourself on track as you're moving through it. So back to this. I want you to keep going. Don't do this to me. Okay. Stop. Okay. No. Why are you doing this to me? I look really dumb right now, and I'm sorry. Why are you fighting me? Okay, we'll open you back up then. Since you want to be dumb. Okay, so pushing it further. So just to show you kind of like the process through. So like this one, again, you know, starting with the K-bar, turning it into a silhouette. I went through a bunch of different ideas for this, came up with this one that I really liked, and then I did some inner workings on top of this one as one of the iterations inside of this silhouette. Why does it keep doing this? I guess we're just going to do this one at a time then. Alright, well. Oh, yeah, because it's long battery. Okay, so these are some, just showing through pushing things further. So I started off with this silhouette and I came up like this, the character I was talking about earlier, that's sort of like cyberpunk kind of put together. Another thing that I talking about color, so doing multiple color iterations of it just to get an idea. So I had an idea. It was really funny. I actually took a picture of some Skull Candy headphones that I saw while I was working, and I was like, I really like that color scheme, and then I just started playing around with that. But just going through some different things to try and get an idea of like where I want the visual focus to be. Something that's really important, I think, is turning everything black and white and understanding that things work on a color level as well as a value level. So you can bring visual focus to something not only with color, like don't just put super saturated colors on everything. What you can do is you can turn everything black and white and make sure that like your brightest brights on a black and white level are on your visual focus area. So if there's, and also a contrast. So if your highest contrast is on like the bottom of the soles of the feet and you want it to be on the face, then you're going to want to change that up. Maybe like bring the K on the feet down to like a 60% and then make sure that the darkest darks are on the face right next to the brightest brights, so that contrast brings visual focus. So it needs to work on a color level and a value level. And I can show that on the other thing as well. Why are you doing this? Okay. So finished, sorta. And I say sorta because it's concept art, so you're not at the finished product. You're finished with your part of it, which is very much early on in the pipeline. I know it's dying, I'm sorry. Oh. Technical issues are bad, and I'm sorry. So we don't die. Okay, so once again, finished, sorta. Go back one. So concept art never really finished, and again, once again, that's just because you're at such an early part of the process. But so this is the end character that I ended up coming up with. I wanted to make sure that the higher saturated things are at the top of it, so I used a lot of darker colors on the bottom half of this, and then I made sure that the highest amount of value contrast was in the face. So the like light green area here is right against the darkest value on it, which is the lens. So not only does this mean that the brightest color is on the face, I even use like a little bit more muted colors on the lights on this side of it. So it's the brightest, most saturated color, and it's also the highest value contrast. So that because I really wanted them to look at the face of the character. So just implementing those things I was talking about. Another character that I did, just to show another going through the iterations. So this is the character that I was using a lot of 3D model to paint on top of, and that is it on that. I will go and show you the value contrast though, just to make a point there. So I can make let me mask this real quick. With black and white. So looking at this, I tried to make the highest contrast more towards the top of the face. So there's a lot of these are the same value as each other. So there's not as much contrast in this. There's a little bit of contrast here because I wanted the pockets, especially on this side, to be a little bit more visually interesting. But I wanted my visual hierarchy to be face, this area, because there's the really bright against the really dark, and then kind of move your way down in the visual interests. So I tried to make it, I keep saying this, but bring the visual interest in both by contrast and value levels. So I'm going to just switch between the two. There's a lot of really muted to saturated colors in this, so it's not a huge difference, but just to illustrate that point. So that's the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening to me babble for a little bit. I have enjoyed talking about it because I love concept art, and is there any questions that you guys have? I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, then thank you.
Okay. So you played Dead Space?
Yeah, I love the first one.
With Isaac Clarke's design,
Mhm.
they have like the user interface, like information that's telling about like how healthy the Isaac happens to be is on his suit.
On his spine.
Design. Yeah.
Mhm.
How would you incorporate more like story elements into a character's design?
Like with Isaac? So
Well, like as giving Isaac as an example.
Oh, okay.
How are other ways that game developers can make their characters' designs tell better stories?
Well, I think making things intuitive, but also doing little details. Like, let's say there's some, like, not making the armor pristine and having certain damages on there. And then maybe, like, inside the game they reference being in a fight. And you're like, oh, maybe that scratch on that armor, like that big gash on their armor, was from that fight. And they can make, like, little connections and things like that. Or if they have an allegiance towards a certain person, they have an insignia somewhere on them, like, you know, not necessarily a military uniform, but maybe there's like a token or like a flag, or maybe they've have like some ripped, or they wear the colors of a certain colony or something like that. There's a lot of ways that you can tell a story with things like that. I think that with Isaac, I mean, the amount of beating up his armor is pretty much says a lot about his personality as well. You know, obviously with giving the player giving like something, a personality, and the fact that it's helpful and intrinsically useful outside of the game by using his spinal cord as the health is really just a great design. I love the game. I reference it a lot for that reason. Other things visually, I mean, you can like if people understand certain weapon sets and things like that, and you want to give it, like, let's say you wanted a character to be more pious, maybe you give them a bow staff or something like that, and people equate that weapon to somewhat to maybe like Shaolin monks and things like that. And just by doing that, you've kind of like maybe give them an idea of the personality the person has. So with the bow staff, there's no blade on it, so maybe they think that this person is less inclined to kill someone just because they don't have a weapon that does that quite as effectively as something that's like a blade or something like that. So you could give some subtle story tips in something like that by understanding the history of an object that you give them, or like I said, with maybe like an affiliation of some kind through color or with colors towards a certain colony. Like I know that in Destiny, a lot of the times they wear the sashes as one of the vanity items, and a lot of those sashes equate to certain legions of Titans and things like that. So that would be a subtle way of doing that. Well, not very subtle; they're pretty bright colored, but a way of doing that as well. And just understand, just finding little ways to tie things in, or give common history or common knowledge history, tying that in because people have certain tropes and stereotypes that they understand. Like Overwatch is a good example because all those characters are played up to their tropes, and their stereotypes are off the charts, and so we have a understanding of what a character might be like just because those tropes and stereotypes are played up to such a certain degree. So I think that visually understanding tropes and stereotypes, and just understanding backstory of items that you give characters or objects and things like that will give them more personality as well. Is there anything else I can answer that? Or is that a sufficient answer, or were you looking for something else?
I was just asking that question to get you to talk about that kind of design.
Okay. Do you think I answered? Oh.
In your experience, when you're approached by a client,
Mhm.
how much mechanics can they really give you up front? Do they have a full-fledged idea? You said you have to basically drag the details out of them.
Yeah.
So they're not really giving you things like, well,
Yeah. A lot of this.
points to be reflected on this.
Right. Yeah. When I work with artists, they generally have an idea of where they're going, but even then, yeah. Even then, I was given like single words like tree, casket, and things like that, and they have like they might. Even then, I had to be like, okay, here's a more cartoony style. Here's more of like a realistic style where you're wanting to do something that looks like it's out of Dracula, where you wanted to do a more of a modern style, where you wanted to do more, and this is talking with someone that's very art inclined. With a commercial that I'm working on at the moment, they were like, we wanted to be about a family, and we wanted to talk about our app, and those were the only two parameters I was given. So I was like, oh, well, let me find some videos of commercials for healthcare providers online, and do you like this one? This one has a lot more text in it. This one is a little more story driven, plays on the emotions. It shows the kid's faces a lot more. Do you want it to be upbeat? Do you want there to be a mood shift between like happy to sad as the progression goes on and things like that? And those are all questions that they for sure would not have asked about, like that they probably have an idea of like the kind of direction they want to go, but they don't know how to ask those questions or to ask those questions. So I just always want to make sure that I have a good idea of where they're going, so that I don't spend a lot of time going in different directions and have to come back to that spot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Building up this idea.
Okay.
So then you would need a receptive client to feed them those.
Right. And if they're not, then you kind of have to, get into the weeds a little bit, where you're like, okay, if you don't really know what the style you're going to do is, let me do this character in 3 different styles, and then you can choose from there. But I think that effectively using things like Pinterest and things like that to show references of like, here's the directions that I can go, really helps a lot. And giving them, because it's easy for someone, even if they're not art inclined, to be like, oh, I like this and I like this, and then you as the artist can interpret, okay, well, I can see a trend here. I see that there's a certain music style to this, or there's a certain like these have thicker, more comic book style lines, and you keep picking out these things with these certain attributes so that you can kind of give yourself a direction on where to go based on trends that they sent by picking out benchmarks that you're setting out for them.
Do you find yourself getting you get a job, let's say, for a customer, and
Mm-hmm.
you get attached to what you know is, I guess, going to work
Mhm.
in a different way? 'Cause, you
I'm
spend
doing
all
that
this
right now.
time doing all this art, and you get to
Mhm.
get a feeling for your character and your idea.
Mhm.
You get attached to it. So.
Yeah. You kind of have to separate the fact that you're not the one pushing the money for it, and understand. And I think that it's really important to do personal work because of that, so that you know that at the end of the day, you're going to be able to do something that is 100% yours. Because if you do nothing but someone else's work all the time, you get frustrated. So I think it's really important. Even if you just do like a 15, 20-minute sketch for the day, that sketch is 100% yours, and there is no direction on it. You did it, you owned it, everything in there, you made all the decisions. And I think it's really important to do that, because there are going to be times, like I said, right at the moment, I'm doing a commercial at the moment, and I really like the direction it went. And the person basically just took in a completely different direction, and I got pretty frustrated. But, you have to try and, obviously keep it professional with them and things like that, but you have to understand that their direction, the customer's right kind of a thing. Kind of, make sure to give, because you're the professional, so make sure to give your 2 cents and be like, hey, I really think that this is going to work better, and and try and find ways to back it up. Like, oh, see, in these commercials they do it this way, and this commercial is really successful, or in this game's really successful, or I pushed it by, I showed it to 30 different people and they really seem to like that and stuff like that. So try and find ways to validate what you're doing. That isn't just I'm the artist, so what I say is more important than what you say. But at the end of the day, if they're the one pulling out, if they're pulling out the pocketbook, then they have the last say in it for sure. Go ahead.
I like when you were discussing your Pinterest
Mhm.
and kind of creating your ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if you can kind of expound on, finding inspiration outside of even things that you might typically or traditionally might be gravitated towards. So
Yeah.
so far as like nature or
Mhm.
cars, or how do you go about finding those inspirations, incorporating that into it, even though it's totally outside of what you're looking for?
Oh, for sure. I honestly getting outside and walk around. One, it's good for you because I'm sure all of us look at a computer screen way more than we should, but that's okay because that's our job. But yeah, just walking around. People watching is really maybe creepy, but I do it a lot because I like to see the way people walk, some of the stuff that they wear, nature, and for me, cars are a big thing because I love hard surface stuff, and the way that cars curve and have like dips and swivels and things like that is really interesting to me, and that's for sure can incorporate that into armor sets and things like that. But I think that for me, Instagram's a really big thing for me. I try and follow not just artists. I try and follow other things like automotive and some more film, and then also people that are just doing things that are not necessarily what I'm into, so that I can, when I scroll, when I'm like having an art block or something like that, I know where I can go to find that information, that inspiration from somewhere. Maybe that's not a very specific enough answer. Going back to building visual libraries and things like that. So, I have folders that are inspiration that is just like, these are things that I like in the genre that I like, that I think are really cool, and I aspire to be these things. But if you have just a folder of that, obviously you're pigeonholing yourself into things that are already created. Whereas the things that are cool are, you're like, oh, I can totally see that inspiration from those things. So making sure you have visual libraries of other things. I guess that's what you're saying to get from the get-go. But you just have to be purposeful about it and make sure that you're not, pigeonholing yourself into things that are already created or looking inside the genre and trying to make something that's already been done a couple of times.
So it sounds like you just got an exercise that you continuously do.
Yeah.
Because you never know when you need to dig into that repository.
Yeah, for sure. And you got to be conscious about it, because I definitely fall into, I've been kind of busy the last couple weeks from moving and stuff like that, but I do try and get some sketches and things like that. And if I go back through and look at my sketches, I'm like, everything's starting to look the same. It's probably time to dip into something else and pull some inspiration from a new point of view, new genre, new feature of something, for sure. And it comes down to, you just have to be active about it and realize that you are pulling from the same inspiration too much, or maybe not even too much, just because you want to do something that's very different from what you normally do, for sure.
We thought Pinterest was a website for game developers. I thought it was my wife running recipes.
Yeah, I thought that's what it was too, and then one of my teachers suggested it, and I was like, it's a pretty good way to get ideas together. And what's nice is you can download Pinterest onto the browser, and you can pin stuff that's not on Pinterest, so you can even do that. I mean, it's not hard, obviously, to right-click and save an image into a folder, but just the setup on Pinterest, for me at least, it's so easy to separate boards instead of having like folders, and it's probably not that much more efficient, but it's efficient enough to where I like to do it, basically. I think it's a really good organizational tool. But I agree. The first time, when I remember probably 5 years ago, I was like, Pinterest is just this thing my sister and my mom like to be on and look at dresses and recipes and stuff like that. But people post all kinds of stuff on there, so it's really helpful in that respect. It's also good because you can link that to people, and so you don't have, like if I want to do it, I use Dropbox a lot, so I can link a Dropbox to whoever I'm talking to. But more people are not proficient, but used to Pinterest, or it's a very intuitive interface, so it's easy to link a board and be like, look through this and see if you like these things. Do you like the color? Going back to what I was saying about inspiration, style, and color, I'd be like, okay, which of these styles do you like out of this Pinterest board? What colors are you leaning towards out of this one? What style do you like out of these ones? And you can just sell them all 3 boards instead of like, oh, here's 3 Dropbox folders. Go through it. So I like to use it a lot. Go for it.
I'll just share one of probably the most powerful tools that I use on Pinterest. It's just a magnifying glass. So sometimes I can look at a picture, it might be something totally unrelated to what I'm looking for, but it might have like a little small mesh, and I'll magnify it on there, and all of a sudden it just display all these different related photos of related meshes of that same quality. Yeah. So it kind of digs me a little bit deeper and deeper into it, just off a little one piece of an image.
And it can link you to whole boards of inspiration that are like that, and you're like, oh, this person was right on the same track mine as I was. Let's look at all the stuff they looked
That's
up.
how they do.
Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely a good point for sure. I definitely agree.
When you get to the point where you're coloring concept art, do you have any tricks for creating a color palette that you're using?
Actually, I'm really sad that I don't have it anymore. But in my freshman year, my teacher gave me an Illustrator file of every gradient of every color in the color wheel across like that. And what I used to do is just pick the squares out randomly from the like 200 of each color, or hues of each color, and then just find one that I liked with that. Generally, I really like doing monochromatic stuff, and so honestly, anytime I do something, the first thing I do is I just saturate the colors that I want, and then I slowly build saturation up from there, because I think that something that I used to do before school was I oversaturated things a lot, and there wasn't any value interest in it, and you're just like, oh look, that's fully blue, that's fully red, and it's just like I don't know, it just hurts your eyes to look at. So desaturating things and then making the things that you really want to stand out more saturated so that it has that value and the colors. So intrinsically, orange and blue are complementary colors, but if you just slam them together on everything, it's just like, it hurts your eyes to look at. So you're like, okay, well, I want the warm color to be the accent for things. So I'm going to put like a little bit on the shoulder that's a higher saturation, a little bit on the helmet that's like even more saturation, so that even though both of these things are orange, amongst the rest of it that's blue, the helmet's going to stand a little bit more because it is more saturated than the orange on these parts. So even if they're like the same color, that you can differentiate between those colors with saturation levels. But color is another thing I do with Pinterest. I will just type in color schemes and I will just scroll through it, because I lean towards, and she can tell you, I lean towards orange and blue all the time. So I have to pull myself away from those colors because it tends to find itself into a lot of color schemes. So like this one was good because I use blue, but most of it's greens and blues, which is something that I don't normally do. And that was just because I was looking around Target, partially because I worked there, partially because I was looking around and just, like picking up on things that looked interesting. And then I was like, oh, I really like this color. I'm going to look up seafoam color scheme on Pinterest, and then just a bunch of stuff came up. And so then I saved all those, and then I brought up like six different images next to the character, and I started color picking from those and like mixing those things together, because they recommended, or some of those color schemes, they thought it was good enough to put it on the internet, which that doesn't hold a lot of weight, but I thought that they looked interesting together, and then see what combinations of those things, and to have a starting point again, just to not go from a blank piece of paper, be like, oh, I really liked the way these flowers look together and the colors that go together, or I really liked the way this building is, or this poster that I saw this one time, or these headphones that looked really interesting, and then just finding like jumping off points from inspiration. I think is a good way to go about it.
I want to see some of the bird space concept art, 'cause I know you got some.
Yeah, actually I do. You are not wrong. I would love the book, but I only have the Destiny book at the moment, which
That's
yeah, I'm excited for the Destiny 2 concept art book to come out. Let's see. So this is my inspiration. Oh, I'll show you the engineer character. Surprise! The engineer character that I made was inspired from Dead Space. But the main thing I was actually looking at ski boots. I really like the way that ski boots looked, just because there's a lot of mechanical and moving elements and stuff like that. Yeah. So this is some Dead Space 2 art, maybe 3, 2. There's one in particular that I really like, because this one, the amount of thought that I went into this helmet by picking it apart piece by piece like this is awesome, to say the least. Specifically this, and just like, and then this, and understanding that like there's only these two slits showing through, but realizing that this shield goes all the way underneath it, and then the armor up here lays on top of that to create that shape. And just like you could throw that in a game and no one would question whether it worked underneath it or not. But the concept artist was like, this needs to work. I want it to fit together. So, and then by doing something like, because if they didn't do this, then when the 3D modeler gets to it, they kind of got to like make guesses, and fudge it a little bit. But with something this detailed, they're like, okay, these are all the pieces I have to make, and then they're going to fit together. So it, just having that attention to detail makes it easier for that, in a video game setting for that 3D modeler to have more, there's less guessing and fudging it going on. So yeah, that's definitely a good thing for sure. Let's see. I also look at Mass Effect. Mass Effect is a good example of iterations to go through. They've got a little bit more simple shapes. I actually had, here's some more concept art for Dead Space. So one of my biggest influences specifically is an artist named Sam Brown. I was actually using him as a reference for my thesis committee in my last year of school, and he was giving me some critique, and I was like, holy crap, someone that works at 343 is looking at my stuff and saying it's interesting. It's awesome. Let me just fanboy out a little bit more. But he does really amazing work. Let me bring this up on his art station just to give an idea of people that are a lot better than me. All right, put this over here. So he definitely, where's the one specifically that I like a lot? This is one of the ones I like a lot. So again, I'm just going through some different iterations. He also has a really clean style. I think a lot of concept, especially Destiny concept art, is a little bit more painterly, which I think is fine because there's a lot of organic shapes in Destiny, whereas in Halo, if you have more painterly style on it, on something that's so hard surface, 100% hard surface like Halo is, there's so much for a 3D modeler to fudge. So you really have to have that clean line style so that these shapes are really defined. And I really love how clean his style is. He doesn't, he could probably get the concepts across and being a little bit quicker and things like that. And I'm sure he has tons of silhouette pages and things like that. But I've always admired the cleanliness of his style. And this is a good example of using color, obviously orange and blue, and using the warm colors sparingly on the head to bring that visual focus there, and then using a lot of muted blues and things like that to be complementary colors, but not oversaturated on the rest of it so that the highest saturation is on the place that he wants it to be.
Got a Twitch question.
Okay.
What are common mistakes and bad habits that starting concept artists?
Probably going in the direction that you want to go, as opposed to the direction that your client wants to go, is something that I did. I know when I worked with Underbite, I definitely had directions that I wanted to go with things, and I really liked it. And like he was talking about, where you get a little too attached to an idea. So just, if it's a personal project or something you have more control over, then go for it. But remembering that there's someone that's paying you to do it, and they're paying you to do it because they have an idea of the way they want to go with it. Maybe like do two versions of it, like this is one that I really like and this is one that I think that you're probably going to like more, things like that. Also, like I was saying before with the visual library, just not pigeonholing yourself into something. Don't like, I really like Halo and Destiny, but I shouldn't look at only Destiny concept art, because like, how am I supposed to bring something new to the table if all I'm, if I come to Bungie and if I come to Bungie or High Moon, which is their support studio, and I'm like, oh, look at all my stuff. I'm like, oh, well, you do really good Destiny stuff, but we want to make an expansion that has new stuff, and we're not making the same expansion again. So you should probably bring something new to the table. Like, if you want to work at one of those places, you should have fan art, and show that you can match the style, but also bring something new to the table. Something else. Don't be afraid to do. You need to do more silhouettes than you're doing currently, and that's something I'm working on too, because you need to being too attached to design. Like, I might have an idea of where I want to go with something, but it's probably not my best idea. And to get to the right idea that is the good idea, I should probably do 20 more silhouettes than I did last time, because what comes off the top of your head, you're attached to it because you've been thinking about it. But then when you sit down and start drawing, better ideas are going to come. Singers don't sing their best song when they first start singing. They have to warm up, and then their voice is warmed up. Or you play a sport, same thing happens. So when you sit down, the first thing you draw is not going to be your best. It's just not. So I would say that warm up and also do a lot of iterations. And silhouetting seems kind of dumb at first, but it's really helpful, and you get a lot of ideas out, and it just helps your client to see a lot of iterations and potentially give you more avenues to go through it. And it's never going to hurt to have more ideas than less ideas. So that it's your job as a concept artist to get lots of ideas and give lots of options. And if you come to the table with 3 concepts and they're like, you only give them 3 options, it's just not going to be as good as 15, 20, 50. So iterations are big, I'd say.
I got one more.
Okay.
How important do you think ST tablet or something like that is in the process?
I had not a Cintiq for a while, and I could not look at the screen and draw. Like, there's some people that I've worked with that refuse to use the Cintiq and like have bamboo tablets, and they just go to town, and good for them. But I think that being able to draw directly on there, it helps me a ton. I know it's a big investment, but it's helping me a ton. I immediately saw my art improve just because there wasn't as much of a disconnect for me personally. I still don't get how people would ever not drawing directly on the screen. Like, if money wasn't an issue, obviously, but there's people that, like, we have I think it's like 24-inch Cintiqs that are huge, and they'll be there on their laptops with like their not Cintiq, like the Intuos 5, like looking at the screen. I'm like, this is like a $1,400 piece of equipment right next to you, and you're using the $200 piece of equipment that is, in my opinion, nowhere near as efficient. But your ability to draw doesn't come from the Cintiq. Pen and paper. I take my sketchbook out and sit outside and draw pen and paper all the time. So, you can practicing your technical skills. It's definitely doable on both. I think silhouetting is harder for sure on pen and paper, and like obviously like it. The whole point of doing silhouette is to move through the process quickly. So if you're like erasing lines and then doing this and stuff like that, as opposed to just being able to undo something or copy the same thing 50 times and then go through iterations of it, like erasing those things, it's going to be more efficient to do on the Cintiq. So I'd say it's important. It's not a bad investment. This one was $800, and it's the 13-inch Cintiq. I don't think you need a touchscreen. I know some people use the Surface Pro. I've never actually used the Surface Pro because I knew I wanted the Cintiq. But I know some comic book artists that swear by the Surface Pro, and the Surface Pro is a little bit cheaper. I think it's in the $500-600 range. I don't know if anyone confirmed that, but it's cheaper. It's a little bit cheaper than Cintiq. The other thing I would recommend is that there's the thing called the Cintiq Companion, which is a computer of itself, and it seems like a good idea, but if you're not doing anything, if you're doing anything besides sketching, like if you want to do anything in 3D, your computer that's the size of this Cintiq is not going to ventilate itself well. If they overheat, they shut off a lot. Like some of the students that I went with, they couldn't even open Flash because it would just crash because it would overheat itself. And the other thing is that, so I have my desktop and I have my laptop. If there's something that goes wrong on my desktop, then I still have my Cintiq. Whereas the Cintiq Companion, if it goes down, you just don't have a tablet. This, if my desktop goes down, I can plug it into my computer or my laptop, continue to go as usual. And if, again, if I have to upgrade the system, I need more RAM, I don't have to upgrade my tablet, I have to upgrade my computer. And so this stays, I think the Cintiq, not the Companion, stays relevant a lot longer as opposed to the Companion. So, because initially, that was one of the big things I was looking at getting a Companion, and after seeing, I was like, it's a little mix more. I think the Companion is $1,200 for the same size, and this one's $800, so it's $400 less, which is a thing. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend the Cintiq Companion. And I would say that getting a Cintiq, you can work on your technical skills and things like that. But I think that if you want it to be a career, then you should look at getting one and investing in one, for sure. So, sweet. All right. Well, thanks again for listening to me talk. Again, my way is not black and white or anything like that. Thank you. Any last questions? If not, then once again, thank you.
What was your Instagram again?
So my Instagram is Austin Whitbeck Art, and so is my ArtStation and my email. I have the same handle on all of those. So right there. So ArtStation on the left, and then ArtStation on the left and Instagram on the right. Huh? Is it wrong? Oh, if I can spell my name correctly.
You know what I was wondering?
Yeah.
I was wondering, like, oh, with that guy.
Yeah.
that guy-
No, Austin spelled wrong. The easy
Oh,
one.
it's Austin.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you had like some goofy
This is
new
crazy.
name
Yeah,
that I
no.
didn't want to be offensive.
Oh no, you can be super offensive because I'm dumb and can't spell my own name. The utmost professionalism when you can't spell your name correctly.
Right.
Do you want me to exile the stream?
Yeah, if you just hit the stop stream thing.
Sweet.